Welcome to My Creative Corner 3, a podcast about quilting, crafting, creativity, with a dash of garden, chatting about current interests and life in my northern town. You can find show notes at mycreativecorner3.com. You can also find all of my social media, how to purchase a virtual cup of coffee, and all events on the website. Please feel free to stop by and leave a comment. I really appreciate everyone who listens. Thanks for stopping by. Welcome to the podcast. Hello, everybody. Here we are. The dog days of summer are upon us. I had a reprieve for the last couple of days from the hot summer, but it's coming right back. In fact, our National Weather Service was trying to be cute and saying it's going to be an 80s week. It's totally awesome. I was just laughing really hard because during the last hot spell here, which was only about a week and a half ago, my husband and I came down with COVID. I know, I got it again. I cannot believe it. Of course, I got it at work from a coworker. Both times, people who really are dedicated to their job and came to work when they were sick. Oh well. I didn't have it as bad. But let's not spend the entire conversation today about COVID. I'm going to be talking about what I'm going to be doing to help get better. But what I wanted to say is during all of that heat, our air conditioner, our 20-year-old central air conditioning unit, stopped working. Dun, dun, dun. I do not tolerate heat well. It was the hottest day. I did call a repairman. My husband actually called, and it happened to be a friend of the family who we knew by serendipity. He came over and looked at it. He's worked on the air conditioner before. He did the best he could, and he got it running again. However, we are getting bids so far. The people we've had come to look at it haven't showed up for bids. This is a problem up here. It's a terrible problem. We have somebody else coming Friday to give us a bid. Hopefully, it's not a scary number. But I'm praying that this week, when it gets back up into the 80s, totally awesome, that it will stay running. So after having, a week off of work, I've been back to work. I have to say my energy is getting better. And I've really started taking an interest in doing quilting, crafting, and making things, which I have not been as interested in doing things for the last few months since I got COVID the first time in May. But I did finish one quilt in July. A friend of mine wanted a all-over swirl on her quilt, and I am trying to load another quilt this weekend. Hopefully, we can get together and everyone will be well enough that the lady who wanted her Irish chain with an all-over swirl can come pick it up for her grandchild. So that was one project that I did. And let's talk about the quilting I have done. Really, in the last week, I have pieced, I think, 3 blocks. And yes, I am working on the Great Granny Squared Quilt Along with Fat Quarter Shop and Lori Holt. I am behind, but who cares? It's just a arbitrary number, right? It's to help motivate people to get something done while everybody else is quilting. Now, I got to look on Fat Quarter Shop to see how many blocks we're supposed to have done by this time. So by today, we are supposed to have 18 of the 20 blocks done, and I have 10 done. So, I'm a little bit behind. I'm okay with that. I knew from the beginning I was not going to be able to keep up 100% because I decided I was going to do all of the Great Granny Squared projects, all of them. So there was a Great Granny Square free pattern by Lori Holt and Fat Quarter Shop on Fat Quarter Shop for cross stitching. Now remember last time I made a mistake in buying pearl cotton, and so I did a 3 block strip, and then I did turn it into a bookmarker. So I did a deep dive on YouTube because, I've never done a lot of cross stitching, and the things that I have done already had finished edges. They were on Ada cloth or even weave that was already designed to have a pattern put on it. So I had to figure out how to finish this bookmark without it becoming a mess. So I watched several. Oh my gosh, there's so many different ways that you can turn your cross stitch into a bookmark. But the method I liked the most was putting a really thick felt back on your piece. And then they used a really thick, double sided, heavy interfacing. What do you want to call that? Anyway, you press it on and it glues both pieces together. So I had a lightweight interfacing for like making t-shirts, and that worked pretty good. But the other part of it is that I was concerned about the top of the cross stitch fraying. So part of the finishing of the bookmark this way is that once you fuse the back to the top of your stitching, you let it cool off. And of course, then my iron spewed water everywhere because I haven't used it in a while. Then you stitch super close to the very edge of your stitching project with a small stitch on your sewing machine. So not only do you have this glued with your melted interfacing, but you're stitching around the edges. And then you trim it as close to your seam as you can, which I did. Now my granny squares are a little bit bigger than the average bookmark. They're like 3 inches wide, so it's pretty wide. But I wanted it. It's the exact right height for my journal, and I can keep this bookmark in place for each weekly spread in my Silk and Sounder journal. I then when I trimmed it all up, I decided, I'm still a little concerned that this 14 count Ada is gonna um, ravel unravel a little bit because I bought cheap Ada cloth online from Hobby Lobby because they were the only place that had the foam core boards that I still want to make, and that's a Lori Holt project too. So I thought, okay, I just bought this really cool little bottle with a very fine tip of Aleene's Original Fabric Fusion. It's a permanent fabric adhesive. So I bought this for some other projects, and I put it on a very thin bead of this glue around the top so that the edges won't fray. So far it's working. I thought I'm going to test this out and put the bookmark in my journal and use it for a while to see how it holds up. And if it works out pretty well, maybe I'll make some more bookmarks of small cross stitch projects. The thing I have found is that I really do remember why I liked cross stitch. It's fun, it's relaxing, it's super meditative. Counted cross stitch is a lot of fun if you pick a stitch count big enough. And the pearl cotton was it's such a thick, you can do cross stitch with it, but you can't do a 14 count Ada. It's too thick of a fabric. So I did it over 2 squares. Then, so it made the project a lot bigger. I really like it. I really like this project, and I liked cross stitch so much, I decided to join in on the You're the Boss of Your Quilt cross stitch project. So that is a stitch along, and if you want to learn all about it, you can go to Jolly Jabber's blog, which is the Fat Quarter Shop's blog, or you can go to the Fat Quarter Shop's Floss Tube, and she does a big introduction a couple of weeks ago on this particular stitch along. And you're the boss of your quilt is something that Lori Holt always says. You're the boss of your quilt. You can make it however you want. And I like quilting and cross stitch so much. It is a cross stitch with little quilt blocks all around it. And in the middle, it says, "You're the boss of your own quilt." And I decided I'm keeping that phrase in there because that's what appealed to me so much about the project. So I started before August 5th because I'm a slow cross stitcher. I'm glad I started early. I got my Q snap frame out. I used to use it for hand quilting and doing cross stitch. I still had it, and all the pieces still are. They fit. It clips on the side, and it is a frame that is very lightweight. It's made out of plastic. And I started, and I realized 14 count Ada on the I think it's Zweigart company, which is what they recommended for this project through Fat Quarter Shop, is a little bit smaller and harder to see than the cheap Hobby Lobby 14 count. And the DMC thread comes in a thread pack, and it all came early. So I got it all ready to go. I even taped the edges of this particular project with a painter's tape because I did a stitch in hand without a frame for the little granny square, and I thought, well, this will be more fun. Well, it's a little small on my eyes. So I dug out my daylight rechargeable desk lamp. It's just a little portable travel lamp. But it's old enough now that it doesn't want to hold a charge. And guess what? The recharging tips are now different on all of our phones and things. So I found we just bought a recharger pack. You know, one of those things that you charge up to take with you so you can plug your phone or your camera or whatever device in. So I've been using that to keep my daylight lamp charged up, and it works really, really well. The light on it is great. I can see well, and I have the first little corner almost done. And of course, there's a mistake in it. There's always a mistake in cross stitch, and I'm not ripping it out. The whole block is nearly done, like 90% of the first block done, because I wanted a wee bit of a head start and try to keep up with this particular stitch along. And there's a mistake in it. I'm not going to tell you what the mistake is. Yes, I will. Okay. I miscounted. This is the frustration of counted cross stitch. When I counted the length of the block, I made it 1x longer than it is wide. It will be fine, but it's not perfect. And this brings up the whole Silk and Sonder theme, breaking up with perfection. I'm leaving it. I have to leave it. I have hours of invested in this, and I don't want to cut a hole in this very expensive Ada cloth. But I learned a lesson. I'm going, because my eyes are not 25 years old anymore, I'm getting the largest Ada cloth you can buy for the next project. Or I'm stitching over 2 squares. But this project, I want it to actually go on the cloth. And to do that, I already cut the cloth down a little bit. It has to be as written in the pattern, which I'm doing. Proud of myself. I'm following the pattern, and I'm not changing it. Yay! Okay, back to Granny Square. What else is part of the Great Granny Square along is crocheting Granny Squares. I started busting this stash of yarn I have, and I realized I don't have very much left. And I didn't like the 3 or 4 tester ones I did. They're really dark, bland colors, grays and yellows and burgundies. And I'm like, I don't like them. So I thought, why not use up this monstrous sized bag of pearl cotton and crochet little granny squares? And they're super cute. They're 3 inches. They're really shiny. They're the same amount of rounds. It's a smaller thread, so versus a yarn. And it's going to make a doll blanket or little tiny pin cushion or something. I don't know yet. We'll see how big it is. So far, I have 13 of those done. So I did 11 of the blocks for the quilt Granny Square quilt. I have the little cross stitch project done, and the crochet project is almost done. And I like these hand projects for the evening, especially during this time of recuperation, because I'm spending a lot more time sitting, and I've been home a few more days than usual because of sickness, and it was fun to be able to do that. So once I finish up with the Great Granny Square crochet project, I'm going to keep going with the cross stitch. And there's always the English paper piecing to do as a handwork. I may get that out this winter. There's lots and lots of hand stitching projects that I could do. But that's about all I've been doing as far as crafts and creativity go. I just been moving really slow. And I was like, man, I wanted to have so much done. I wanted to have all of these quilts long armed. I wanted to do this. I wanted to do that. One thing I'm going to walk away from when you get sick, and I have had many sicknesses in my life where it knocked me down for, say, a year, or I've had chronic illnesses with flare ups that kind of put you down for a while. But I've had most of that controlled and managed really well for the last 10 years. And I remember having to do this deep breath and rethink my daily rules for myself. For example, I always like to have myself fully dressed every day, even when I'm sick, before noon. I used to have a rule before the whole pandemic started that I would have full makeup and hair done. I let that rule go because I realized it's kind of a ridiculous rule. Well, I broke my rule today. It's 12:30. I'm still in my pajamas and I haven't showered yet because I decided to do a little bit more this morning. And I like to do my housework and some of my exercises and stuff before I shower. So that was the rule. The other rule is about the housework I just mentioned. I used to do um, a big cleanup every morning and a big cleanup every night, which I still try to do when my health allows it. And the cleanup routine is the kitchen dishes and making sure the counters are wiped off. And at least if I don't get that done before I go to bed, I do that the next morning so that when I come home from work, the kitchen is clean. It's the first room you come to in my house, and I really hate coming home to a dirty kitchen and dirty, stinky dishes. Even though right now I can't smell them, no one likes that. So I have been keeping up on the dishes. But as far as the rest of the housework, it used to be do that plus the Fly Lady 15 minutes and keeping up on all your decluttering and a zone and trying to keep the whole house done with the power hour of cleaning on Saturday. No, that has not happened in months. And the house got a little cluttered more than usual. Believe me, people, I do not have a minimalist clean house where everything is put away. My house is pretty lived in, and we like it that way. And I have to say, I'm a maximalist. I have lots of collections. But my rules have always been that as we bring more things into the house, you have to either store, pack, put away, or get rid of items and then rotate them out seasonally. And I've been trying to keep up with that. But the clutter has gotten pretty bad. Like all of my cross stitching, my crocheting, all that turned out to be a mountain by my chair. So I spent this morning in very small increments of time just picking a few things up. And I did get the dusting done a little bit. I'm only spending like 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes on a project. Wipe the sink out in the bathroom. Then I had to rest. So I've had to break things down to, micro time a day for micro times and not blocks of time, not even 15 minutes. I can't do a lot of that kind of heavy work in 15 minutes. So when I have a minute, literally 1 minute, I'll do something like wipe out the sink. So my housework has been broken up to multiple micro steps throughout the day. And this is how it is when you have a chronic illness or a condition where you can't tolerate doing activity. My lungs are not fully healed, even with the inhalers. I still get really winded and short of breath and tired. So micro steps. And this is how I have had to do my house during flare-ups over the years, but I was always able to do 15 minutes. No, I have to sit and take a break now. That's okay. It's just annoying more than anything. And that's how I've been doing my crafts too. I can do 10 or 15 minutes of sitting at a machine, but I can't do much more than that. So I'm back to doing like 5 minutes. I'll cut out the one granny square block and then I'll sit down and then maybe I'll crochet because I don't have to think about crocheting a granny square. I'll do 10 or 15 minutes of cross stitch maybe after work or on my lunch because my brain is tired from all of the decisions I've had to make at work. And I'm literally doing very meditative, not many decisions for the brain when I'm resting. So what's nice about cross stitch is I don't have to think about pattern design or anything. I'm following this pattern that's already been made. So that's kind of how I've been approaching the last couple of months. Now, what I'm trying to add on is daily rehabilitation things, like 15 minutes of it in the morning and 15 in the afternoon. Now, this rehabilitation is my own research and my own desire because there's really no information out there about long COVID. So to exercise my body, I've decided, stretching, isometrics. If I can do 5 minutes of that, that's wonderful. And if I can do 5 minutes a couple of times a day, it's adding more activity each day. I got this new watch, so I'm counting all of my steps accurately. Some days I can only do 1,000 steps. Some days I can do closer to 3 or 4. 4 is like the most I've been able to do, and not all at once. Well, a few weeks ago, I was able to row for 5 minutes, and then I got sick again. So I'm slowly adding hand weights and doing some body movements, just really lightweight. And I'm hoping to start that again this week. Super lightweight stuff, nothing heavy duty. Smelling, I have a collection of essential oils. So I'm doing the smell training where you pick 3 or 4 scents and you try to smell them and you sniff them and try to remember what they smelled like, what it felt like when you were making things. Like this one is orange spice, so it kind of reminds me of fall and pumpkins, and tea tree oil. I have some of that, which is fresh and clean and disinfecting kind of a smell. I really can't smell much of these things, but it's getting a little bit better every day. I had a lot more smell and taste coming back. Then I got sick again and I'm back to ground zero. So those are kind of my rehabilitation things for my body. And then for my mind, I've been doing patterns like cross stitch reading patterns, Wordle, trying to do Candy Crush, simple games. The other thing I've been trying to do is learn something new or read something. So that has been helping keep my brain exercised. And then I did find for my mind is I'm going to try a free virtual group through my doctor's office. And we'll see how that group is. I don't know how often they meet a month. I think once or twice a month. And they're happening to have a meeting this week. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe I can find that to be helpful. I've conducted lots of educational groups before as a healthcare worker, as a nurse, but I have never really participated in them. So it will be interesting to be on the other side of conducting educational groups, is to be participating in one. So we'll see how that goes. It's something new. See, you learn something new every day. Now, those are the things that I have been working on, and I will do show notes with information about the Great Granny Squared Along, as well as You're the Boss of My Quilt. But I have to say, I have like really become super, super interested in Lori Holt's new fabric line, as well as a couple of her older lines. And this Great Granny Square pattern is really good. But her yarn, oh my, it's called Chunky Thread and it's 100% cotton. And I like working with 100% cotton. So I'm on a waiting list because I'm rethinking my Granny Square cardigan that I started last winter. The yarns are not coming together as I pictured at all. I need more coats of many colors look that the Granny Square went with. And I only picked two colors and I just don't care for it. So I'm going to change that project probably after the hot days. I'm going to sew those granny squares together or crochet them together into a different type of a project. So I am really excited about purchasing some Lori Holt chunky thread when I get the opportunity from Fat Quarter Shop because they have collections of her multicolors, which is what I like. And I really like her colors. They're fresh, they're spring, they're summer, they're fall, but they're saturated, bold colors. And they are really appealing to me. The next thing I want to get is some probably charm packs. And she came out with a new line called Prairie, and I really like the same colorway that she always uses, but they're micro prints. And there's another one called I think it's something about bees. I know Halo Inspiration has them, and they're in my shopping cart. And I'm just trying to remember. All right, let me put you on pause and let me look it up. Yeah, bee plaids. And yeah, there's a lot of plaids and checks, but they're not like super homespun, that homespun look. I really like that. And then she has another Lori Holt line on her shop that is cooking. And I really, really like that one. I may have to get it another time. And when I save up my money, I want to buy the lamp with the magnifying glass on it. And it's called a halo lamp, which would help me with my cross stitching and my hand sewing very, very much. So those are, yeah, cookbook is the other Lori Holt one that I really like. She also has one called Stitch. That one is cute too, but it's got a little more grays and browns in that line than I like. But the prairie and the bee plaids are definitely in my shopping cart. I think they would make great English paper piece projects. So yes, I am really having to think about it. Now, something my mom just told me that I am glad that I have a little bit of a stash, and maybe you will too, is that sounds like we're having another bad year on cotton because of drought. And I'm really, really working on trying to not buy large amounts of new fabric. I know I just told you I'm buying 5-inch charm packs. Yes, I am. I mean, I can't completely not buy, which I have been on a very strict buying buying curtailment for lots of reasons. And one of it is I got a stash. I've had the stash given to me as an inheritance from one of my late friends, and I've been using the stash. So the good news is I've got lots of fabrics to pick from, and same with yarn. I do have yarns for projects, but mostly I have a stash of cotton quilting fabric. So the good news is if you've got a stash, if prices take a massive jump again over this next year, as my spending power with my current income becomes less with groceries and other economy related things, I still have lots of options to be able to make quilts and make projects. The only thing I want to get a little bit more of, which I'm going to do over time, is buy some more light background fabric, just a few yards here and there, as well as some batting. Now, I have hoarded a lot of my batting scraps over the years of being 10 years now of being a long armor. So for projects, I have batting that I can franken bat pretty well. And believe me, I'm using that. The other part of all of this that I'm trying to summarize is that I'm trying to be more earth friendly and upcycle and recycle fabrics that I have that would be appropriate, projects, upcycling, things like, for example, I have a Tide Pod container that I saved last fall. And I saw a really cute Cricut project. If you take the labels off it, mine happens to be white. I could make a cute white pumpkin on one side and turn it over and put a little face on the next side for a snowman. And maybe I could even crochet or knit a little stocking hat for when I want to show it as a winter decoration. And you could put in a little battery operated tea light. So I'm trying to use my wee yogurt jars and trying to recycle and upcycle as much as possible. There's so much waste in my house that I'm trying to not be a person leaving a lot of garbage in the landfill, and just so much waste just everywhere I go. I see garbage and plastic, and I'm starting to feel like a kid watching all of the shows on Schoolhouse Rock. The ones that remind us that we need to take care of the earth. So I want to end today's podcast with a little story about a real life situation that happened at a quilt show earlier this summer, and then ask a question, and then maybe offer a couple of solutions. So my friend made a COVID quilt. Her quilt guild did Moda Blockheads as a quilt along with the guild online while everybody was pretty much locked down still, or they were not meeting face to face. And my friend made a lovely, lovely quilt. It's a wall hanging size. It has, I believe, 9 blocks on it. And one of the blocks was an applique block in the center. And in May, I quilted it and I started it right about the time I got COVID. So it's truly a COVID quilt. Everything about this quilt. It was a beautiful quilt. It's pinks and turquoises and all kinds of beautiful color and modern. And this is the first show she had ever entered her quilt into. And I may have talked about this on the last podcast. And we were both so excited. We both worked so hard on it. I want to also interject here that I was thinking about joining this guild. It's not my hometown guild, but it is over a couple of counties, and my friend is part of it, and it's a very active guild. And I have had a few run-ins with the quilt police there before, but I thought, well, maybe things have changed because I knew a couple of other ladies who have joined. And wow, the week of the quilt show, there was a big controversy over people entering their Moda Blockhead blocks into the show, and that they should be for demonstration, even though my friend paid the fee and paid to have comments on this quilt and paid to have it exhibited. All of the people who did this challenge were going to have their quilts just hung on quilt racks and hang around the educational area about how to quilt and what is a quilt. And I was like, are you kidding me? And so we get there, and because of that, nobody else had put their blockhead quilt in the show. And I get there and I look all over and I can't find this quilt that we both worked so hard on. I mean, I can't tell you how many hours I spent long arming it. It was custom long armed. It wasn't like micro quilting, but it was still a lot of work on each block. And I am starting to get upset thinking about this. I get to the corner, literally in the corner, in the education corner, they have a quilt rack, and sure enough, hers was folded up. And this is in a church, and so the quilt was underneath a piece of art that showed the crucifixion. And it was folded up to the tiniest little sliver, showing one partial block at the bottom of the quilt. And the docent came up to me, and I had come back to it now twice once I figured out where it was. And she goes, oh, so do you want to learn how to quilt? Do you know what a quilt is? Do you want to understand how a quilt is made? And I said, well, I do know how to quilt. And in fact, I long armed this quilt. And I pointed to the one that was on the quilt rack. And I said, it's a shame that this quilt isn't being shown, because it really is pretty. And I can't tell you how many hours of work I put into long arming this for my friend. The docent looked a little embarrassed, and she said, well, you did a nice job. I noticed every block had something different. I said, yes, I really worked hard on custom quilting this quilt. It's all free motion. It wasn't done with a computer. And she said, well, then you know all about quilting and how much work goes into a quilt. And I said, yes, I do. Thank you, though. Thank you for the words about the quilt. I still am disappointed that it's not hung up. Just about the time I was ready to leave the show, because this is in June and I'm still really breathless. I'm still really tired. I couldn't do a lot of walking. I'm sweating. I'm weak. Run into a couple of other my friends who came over to look at this quilt. They also were like, I can't believe it's folded up on a rack. And I told the story about telling the docent. And I thought, I want to go back and get pictures of the award-winning quilts that were displayed across the aisle from the How to Quilt display where this was folded up, and get some pictures and then make a couple TikToks and shorts for YouTube. And I see the head people all wearing their badges, like their, the board of the quilt show. And they said, well, we probably should hang this quilt up because it is a pretty quilt. It is a beautiful quilt. Beautiful was the word they used. And someone brought in a photography backdrop display, because my dad had those, so I recognized it. And they got a couple plastic pant hangers and they hung it up. And I found one lady before she left who was one of the board members, I think. I said, thank you for hanging that quilt up, because my friend and I worked really, really hard on that quilt, and she did a beautiful job on it. And then I asked her to take a picture of me standing in front of the quilt. I know that was really probably pretty rude of me to do, but I was so upset I couldn't help myself. So I did it. I've got a couple of rotten pictures of me because the lighting's bad, and she had to make my face look the fattest. It's the worst angle. But I got a picture of me standing in front of the quilt, taken by a board member of the quilt show. I'm not joining that guild. I decided if that's how they're going to be, no, because it was a beautiful quilt, and it was much better than several of the entry quilts that they had hanging in prestigious places. Anyway, all of that to say, let us not be the quilt police. I have not run into them in years because I don't generally go to smaller events like this. Oh my goodness. How much more petty and rude could you be? Because evidently you have to be in their quote clique and whatever to be in the show. Quilting is about being an artist and expressing yourself and putting it out there for everyone to see in a show, right? It's really a your personal um it's personal. And then to have that happen, I have a little bit tougher skin than my friend, I think, and I was not going to let them just leave it like that without saying something. But I shouldn't have had to, right? I should not have had to do that. And so this is why I don't join any guilds around here because they all have the same kind of people in it. And I really don't like that. I think we need to be more open. We need to be open to ideas that other people have. We need to embrace and encourage people to quilt no matter who you are, what age you are, what race, what your orientation is, what economic status you are, whether the quilt is upcycled, recycled, or whatever. It- That's to me what the quilting community should be, not the quilt police that I ran into. So we only have kindness here. And, everybody who quilts is an artist and makes pieces of art. I have quilts that are technically better than others, and I have some that are emotionally more expressive, or I've put more of myself into them. It doesn't matter because there's something magical about being able to cut up pieces of fabric or take scraps from a bin and put them together into making something beautiful. And it is labor intensive and it's very therapeutic. And there's just a lot of creativity that goes into making a quilt. So I say no to the quilt police. And I don't want to contribute to those kinds of groups. All of that said, where can we go? Is there a virtual group online that's active, that has meetings where we can actually meet people? Where is there a smaller guild that has this and would accept people from not living in their area? I've run into nobody that's having like monthly meetings or virtual contacts because I live pretty far away from a lot of guilds. And yeah, so I'm kind of looking for something like that. Quote group. I don't want to say it's a guild, a quote group. Anyone have ideas? Um, Let me know because I would like to join something that's active, that is into challenges, that's into a charity, that's into all kinds of active things, not just a group that you pay your dues to and say you're part of and you never meet anybody or have any relationships with people. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And let us all remember that there's no place for rudeness in a quilt show or a guild or anything. I thought it was worth telling that story. I thought about not telling it. I didn't feel well earlier and I didn't want to tell it and feel really bad about it. But I think it's important that we understand that this kind of behavior and these kind of attitudes still exist. And there's really no room for it in the world. The world is a tough enough place as it is. And this is supposed to be something that brings us joy and helps us express ourselves. And it's a very personal craft. So let's not be like that. Well, that's all I wanted to talk about this week. I'm starting to cough a little bit, and I want to rest up now. So check out the show notes. I will put links to some of the things that we talked about. I also want to tell you that I am an affiliate of Fat Quarter Shop, and I have a link. So if you buy things from Fat Quarter Shop and you use my link, then you pay exactly the same amount as you would normally, but I get a little bit of a percentage so that the next time I order something from Fat Quarter Shop, I have a little bit of discount or credit. So thank you for those. Thank you, Barb. Thank you for using my affiliate link. I would also want to remind everyone that you can buy me a virtual cup of coffee if you'd like to support the podcast or the blog. And I want to thank all of those who have purchased a cup of coffee from Ko-fi, Ko-fi.com. And you can find that also on the blog. Barb and Diane and Gail and everybody who have purchased me coffee. Marsha, thank you so much for all of the coffees that you have bought over the last couple of months. And the last thing is, I'm still doing Saturday morning coffee on the blog, mycreativecorner3.com. And I am going to do another YouTube video here in the next day or so and show you the Great Granny Squared projects that I have been working on. The sun is coming out this afternoon, so maybe I'll get that recorded today while the lighting is good. And also TikTok is, if you're into TikTok, I do have an account. It's vholloway12345, and I post pretty regularly on it. It's not all about quilting, but I do a lot of quilting short videos in a vertical format there, and having a lot of fun with it. So thank you so much for listening to the podcast. And I look forward to chatting again. And please feel free to leave a comment so that we can keep the conversation going online. Everyone have a most wonderful week. Stay safe, be healthy, and happy. Bye now.